you get a chance, check out To Your Eternity because it's by the same author
Mhm.
this is based on.
Yeah, I was going back and looking at Kyoto Animation's portfolio because someone mentioned it online, and I was like, they were talking about Fire, and I was like, man. And I realized like just how many things had come out of Kyoto Animation that like are very much at the top of my list.
Yeah,
and I had yet to watch Silent Voice.
yeah, it had been on my list for a while, and so I was excited to watch it because, I watched like Your Name and Weathering with You, and those are like the ones everybody touts as the big great anime movies, and then I hear that the director of both of those is like, no, A Silent Voice is better.
Yeah, it's the degree with which the directors of a lot of like the big title anime movies of the last couple of years have like held themselves is very impressive to me, to say the least.
Well, they're trying to. This is a field that's actually hard to do well in. Movies aren't actually that big in Japan that much. They don't last long. Actors in general focus more on TV than movies, and they're trying to really carve out something and build more of an industry.
Right.
Oh, totally.
Are you guys ready to
Yeah.
to start? Okay. So all right, let's start. Tonight we're going to talk about A Silent Voice. It's a 2016 anime movie, and I just read that it's the adaptation of a manga series of the same name.
Yep.
I didn't know, and I had never really heard of this movie, let alone the manga. So this was Ian's suggestion for us to watch this, and I thought it was going to be super boring because I read the synopsis and watched the trailer and thought it looked pretty shitty. It looked pretty, but I thought it looked pretty boring, and I was completely wrong. I love the movie.
Yeah.
It is like just my end result end of it was just fantastic, and it took me through a roller coaster of like different thoughts, as at times I felt different things about certain characters that definitely evolved throughout the movie, so that my notes basically like went up and down and all over the place as stuff happened. As I look at how the stuff I checked out early in the movie, I was like, look at back and now as it changes, just overall fantastic, just plot and character development, animation.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely loved this movie. I was excited for it. I loved Kyoto Animation and everything they ever made. Like, it's always been up there for me.
So what
I feel
is
like
it?
they really brought their A game in this for
What is
sure.
what is some of the other stuff they made? What is it?
They're really popular for a lot of other like traditional anime. So things like K-On!, The Melancholy of Haruhi Miya's Suzumiya.
Suzumiya,
yeah. Ms. Kobayashi's Maid Dragon. They did a couple of seasons of Free, which is an anime about a swimming team.
Yep.
I know none of these are like really wetting your whistle, Bruno.
Well, I haven't heard of any of those, so yeah, that's definitely that's deep into anime territory. That's way too deep.
And these are more
I only know like the mainstream stuff.
These are more drama, slice of life stuff, which
yeah, they kind of
you were saying you hadn't seen a lot of these, but I mean, there's a lot of really great shows that deal with such simple things. Like there's a series currently going on about a guy who is playing the traditional Japanese samisen, and it's all about the music and the playing through that. And it's like, it's simple. Like, these are things. There's a lot of anime and manga out there that are about truly like just parts of life that we don't talk about, that we don't see as much. And this one in particular hits home for me because there's it deals with something that I feel like gets overlooked a lot. And I think there's some cultural aspects of this that we might not actually have enough context for, which is why I had some time to just ask some people around about is whether or not like I am reading into some things a little bit that um, we can get into here in a bit.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it now. I mean,
Well, I mean, the
we have
first
to talk about something. So
sure.
the first thing I want to touch on is bullying is a problem in Japanese schools.
Oh, totally.
And
Uh,
we talk about how we have bullying here. The level of bullying that goes on that is apparently something that's not talked about enough, but it is something where it's might be at a shocking level. I have someone who I spoke to who, when talking and when they watched the film, they were apprehensive to watch it because they were like, they lived it there, and and so to me that was my first read on this was just how much I hated the bullying. Like it was something that just triggered a very strong emotion within me of just how cool it was. And we can circle back around to that on how my feelings of that changed the more I had time to see how I feel like the school kind of failed the kids in a lot of different ways.
yeah, I mean, I think this movie has some incredible themes.
Yeah.
I would say that from a film perspective, its themes are incredibly strong, and that's probably the strongest characteristic of the movie, hands down. Because I mean, everything that like jumps out, like bullying being number one,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with like mental health.
Also very stigmatized.
Oh, totally. I think this movie does a lot to touch on things that are very, just very stigmatized in general, and especially in Japan. I would also say the other one that really came out to me that I didn't think was as apparent was the infantilization of differently abled people.
Yes. And I feel like because initially I was shocked that a atypical child was put in a regular class and expected to keep up with everyone else and complete the lessons with a teacher just up there lecturing, and other students were supposed to write for her, were supposed to help her along. And to the point where I was like, they set this girl up to be resented by her fellow students. And the girls in particular who grew to resent her.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was where like by the end of like that part of their life, like I went from just being absolutely angry at, granted he was intolerably cruel to her, even though it was actually born out of an odd desire to want to communicate with her, it would seem, and being the only kid who wanted to, which we can get into how that is very complicated in their relationship and how she reciprocated his actions. But I really like, because like here we have well, in still not even adequate, it's still not 100% adequate to what we need for atypical children, but we have like deaf communities, we have whole deaf schools. I think there's even a Netflix documentary on a higher education institute that is purely for deaf and atypical students of that variety. And so there's something where like the 90% of the community is deaf, or at least of some form. And so we have that here, where here they, like I said, they just plop a girl in here and just say, okay, everyone, you're supposed to use her notebook, and then you all are going to learn sign language, which part of me is like, okay, that's cool, they should, but this is something that you're really dropping on a bunch of 12-year-olds.
Yeah, and I think everything that happens is like, especially in elementary school, is tolerated at best.
Mm-hmm.
So they had no plans of like bringing in a sign language specialist at first, and then it became apparent that Shoko was being bullied more often, and they figured that might have been help.
Yeah.
And when she finally transfers out of the school, I think everybody in the class realizes like the elephant in the room.
Mhm.
When the principal's just like, we think she's been bullied. We'd like to know who it is. And like, they didn't first go to the teacher to be like, who's bullying this child, right? Like, there's a very different set of expectations and cultures around education. Like,
Mhm.
it's seen as really not compassionate. It's seen as a business, or is treated as something very formal. And
What
I think
seems
all of the measures that they took um, to accommodate Shoko just come off as tolerant at best.
Yeah, it seemed like and I just felt like they passed it off to the kids. I mean, the fact they put her in the choir,
Right, like,
affected the girl, the other girl, and then the teacher just seemed like, oh, I guess you messed up there. And I was like,
did no one get an email or
yeah,
something?
it's, and so I was frustrated by this so much. But then like I had to sort of step back and say like, okay, what context do I not understand here? Like, am I missing a cultural? And so this is where I kind of felt like I needed to ask around and do some research on that. And while obviously I'm still I can't speak to it, but it does, I feel like it's amazing that we were able to get a film to show that this is a problem,
Mhm.
and to see it done in a very um, careful way. Like they were very careful to give it the nuance, to not pin it on one particular person. Although in my personal view, this really comes on. Yes, the children are terrible. You know, they bullied her and they were cruel. But they also have the emotional capacity of, you know, a wingnut.
It-
Um, and adults should know better.
yeah, I mean, I think this movie does a fantastic job of showing um, showing Shoko fall through a systemic set of failures,
Yeah.
right? And I think that becomes evident uh, with all kinds of subtext when you start to meet her family.
Yes.
So when Shoya goes to try and make amends as a teenager,
Mhm.
and he meets her younger sister Yuzuru, he's realizing very quickly the amount of like barriers and defense mechanisms that everyone has put up for Shoko.
Yeah, and from my research, there's actually some stuff that we don't get that are in the manga about her family, which I kind of wish was delved into more, like how her father left the family
Mhm.
over her disability, or her, in that her in-laws as well. So they sort of blamed it on the health of the mother.
Right.
It's something that they don't get into in the movie, but I think you can sort of see it in the way her mother is portrayed.
Yeah,
As,
I definitely agree with that. I think there are a lot of there's a lot of problems in Japan that if we were to look at them like in direct, like apples to apples examples in America, you'd be like blown away. You'd be like, that's like giga racist.
yeah,
Um, like Japan has some serious problems with just like outward straight up racism.
mhm,
And it's not any better when it comes to accepting people who are different or accommodating. There's this really toxic and ignorant um, mentality of like wanting to blame things on something,
yeah, and
and it definitely extends to like mental health. And I think that's why mental health has become such a massive obstacle, and why they have such a problem with suicide rate is because it's so stigmatized that
Very
anytime you try and open up to someone about that, it's culturally it's very easy for them to jump to minimize it, like, you're probably just a little sad,
Mhm.
or like, I don't see why you're taking time off, like, why can't you just get over this? Like, it's a lot of just like, get over yourself, as opposed to any sort of compassion.
Yeah, and what's what I credit the film for. At first, I wasn't on board for the guy who I was because he got his karmic returns for his bullying, and at first I was like, why we're spending so much time dealing with the pain of the guy who was the tormentor for so much of the movie. But I think over the course of the film, I sort of understood why, and part of it was the failures the system had on both of them. It also helped that once I had a chance to sort of consider the fact that Shoko was basically being isolated by everybody except for him.
Mhm.
And it's still not right how he treated her. But he also was responding to, everyone else's emotions on it too, and not knowing how to deal with these kind of things because no one ever teaches you that. And so I sort of came around to the complexity surrounding his development, and really loved how he sort of changed throughout the movie, and how they both sort of became a personal growth for both of them.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really had to go back and re-examine
Mhm.
was the subtext of why Shoyo becomes a bully.
Mhm.
And it was kind of hard for me to pick up on it, but it's because he himself is being bullied.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I think that very much fits into the old mantra that, a bully is just someone else who was bullied. Bullying is a chain.
Mhm.
And when they all try and like confront each other, and Shoya accuses everybody else in his class who are not dealing with the repercussions of this, they all feel as though they don't have any hand in it, or never did.
Right.
Which is just so wild to me. I think that's the amount with which he was bullied, I think, was really only seen by Shoko.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't in the movie itself. I don't think we see him being bullied at first, do we?
I think there's nuance to his relationship with the friends and the rest of the class.
So there's nuances to it, but then there are things that allude to it. So, like, there's a scene where we see him in the river. It's because he was pushed in by his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a scene where Shoko was scrubbing his desk because they had graffitied on it, and then they start fighting and like hitting each other. And I think that's because she knows why he's bullying her, but he doesn't know why he's bullying her. Like, he doesn't realize that he's being bullied as acutely as she does.
And I think because it's out of a similar fact that he was being isolated, or at least felt like it, because his friends are, I think it's implied that his starting friends are moving on to other things that he isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it was mentioned one of them, or at least it was shown that one of them is going to cram school. And so while they used to do all these things together, now they're sort of ignoring him and saying, and like leaving him out of it. And so without having his friends as an outlet, here comes this new person he's curious about. He doesn't know how to talk to her and then he feeds off of how he was treated, and then she's also being isolated by the girls. That scene where she keeps trying to be friends with the girls and they just leave her,
right?
And he's also left there. It's like, that's a scene where like they've both basically been isolated, and she did understand. You're right. She understood in that moment that they both were isolated, but obviously he didn't, I think deep down didn't want to accept the isolation, and so he took it out on her. Not good. It's a very toxic reaction, but
I think
it's
it also shows how quickly children learn ableism,
yeah.
because he was able to look at that and say, well, she's being singled out because she's deaf,
Mhm.
whereas he couldn't figure out why he was being singled out, right? Like there's no outward reason for it.
Mhm.
And I think it really just escalated from there when he goes into junior high and high school. You know, like I think that's really where the movie I think shines, is how it chooses to depict just like his downward spiral. Like we see his friends, you know, slowly pulling away from him, and like we see this slow descent into isolation and disassociation. Like there's
what I-
that scene where he's got that CD and he's like trying to listen to it with his friends, and they're like, you know, I'm not really into this band because I just kind of think of you when I hear them. Like that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then throughout the rest of the movie, they explain it as him not being able to look people in the eye with the blue X's over everyone's face. But I mean, it's a pretty direct representation of just like classic mental disassociation.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I found it great, the progression, like that was the movie where like really started, as you said, building up to something really great. His eventual basically filling out and finding the new friends in the Nagatska, the kid with the rotund kid with the
Oh, the short green hair.
Yeah, who was fantastic. It just shows that like all it took was for him to do a random act of kindness and realize that like all it took is for him to interact again, and that's what started him along the path that he ended up going on. And I really appreciated that aspect of it too, and to just get better friends.
Yeah, I think it definitely shows that it shows him being rewarded for questioning and just choosing to do the right thing, and choosing to grow as a person. And he actually makes a genuine friend.
Mm-hmm. So I think we spent a lot on Shoya because being one of the main leads. So I kind of want to because the cast is fantastic all around. I guess
so
go ahead.
About the subs versus dubs argument. One of the things that put this movie on my radar was a classic subs versus dubs debate. Somebody cited that dubbed work is good now because anime is popular enough that syndication in the US can actually pay for talent.
Okay.
And I think this movie is a fantastic result of that. Before, having a good dub was few and far between, and there are a few anime that really jump out to me. Wolf Children did A-list casting for the American dub. They had Tina Fey and Billy Crystal in Howl's Moving Castle, things like that. Those all hold very true.
And then the random good dub TV series like Yu Yu Hakusho, wait, how did that get a good dub? But
so I actually don't think Yu Yu Hakusho is that great of a dub, because I think it's one of those things that has some really heavy nostalgia armor to it.
That may be true.
It's because you didn't have the luxury of getting to choose to watch a good anime. You just had if you wanted to watch anime, you had a handful of options. Mm-hmm. But I would say, as far as the voice acting work in this movie, it jumps out because they had Lexi Marmon, who is a deaf accented voice actress, voice all of Shoko's lines. Yeah, and her work is fantastic. So I would encourage you to at least go back and watch like some clips.
Okay.
There are a couple of Shoko compilations of the English dub, but I thought that was
That's
it was
yeah,
very
that's
brave. It was well cast. It was just well done. So that's why I went with the dub. But even then, I didn't feel like I was missing anything, or I didn't feel like it was some pared down, like anything lost in translation. I feel like I, got the full experience of the movie for what it was worth.
Why did you choose to watch it dubbed instead of subtitled?
Well, because someone had told me that they had cast a deaf accented voice actress for Shoko's role. I was very interested in seeing that, or hearing that, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can't really speak because like Daniel, I think you watch the subtitle version as well, right?
normally that's just my default these days.
Yeah,
I have heard, though,
I
that
prefer
dubbing has
subtitle
been
for
better.
sure.
I know there's a debate on the Kaguya-sama Reddit on the dub versus sub.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I only watched the sub. I almost always I'll choose subs.
But I think there has been a more recent debate on that due to the fact that, like, I think, as you said, they've been putting better efforts into getting good cast and getting the right kind of cast for certain roles. So I'm gonna revisit that then, because it'll be interesting for me, because I have such a fondness for all the characters in this movie, even the ones that I don't like as a person, like Ueno.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she was characterized so well and acted so well that, like, that's the response you're supposed to have.
Oh, for sure.
And I'd be very curious to see what her dub would be instead.
Yeah. I've just got to say the dub was top notch in this movie, and
Okay.
I'm very stoked about dubs no longer sucking in anime.
Yeah, I might recommend this as a dub to Lauren then, because I keep trying to get her to watch something like this, and I feel like this would be. Although when we watched the trailer and she saw the part where he pulls
Right.
it out of her, she was like, "I think I'm really mad at this movie."
Yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I think that got Emily pretty good too.
yeah.
I do think that I haven't seen a dub, so I can't really speak to how good it is. And from what you've said, Ian, I mean, I fully believe you 100%. So I'm sure it's as you don't really miss much at all because it's great. But I do think that the sub in this case, I usually don't really care that much in anime because anime is not the real world. It's like fantastical. Like a fantastical representation of the world, and most anime that I would watch, like Death Note or something like that. But in this case, this is like representing reality. So, and it's set in Japan in a Japanese high school. So I do feel that the fact that it's in Japanese, I feel that it's sort of important because there's a soul to a language, right? So. You feel like what they're expressing in that particular setting, and if you just like do English, and again I'm sure it's great because you said it's fantastic dub, but and it can be, but I just don't think it's the same soul. English and Japanese are not the same vibe. They're pretty different languages.
I would think the only lost in translation moment is the ski and moon mix.
Oh, sure.
Because ski and ski are like very subtly can mean, you can easily say the difference between I love you and I love the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a joke that I get a little bit because I've seen enough romantic or rom-com animes where that's a typically misunderstood one. This is done all very subtly well, the way they did this one. So
yeah, I would definitely recommend watching that scene in particular in the dub and
Okay.
see how you feel about it, because I agree that The ski pronunciation definitely doesn't translate because it just doesn't.
Mhm.
But I think they handled it gracefully enough in that scene. And even if you didn't know that, watching that in the dub, you would still understand that it was like simply just her accent that
Yeah.
was solely the cause. But yeah, that would be a scene that jumps out to me if I were to cite something to defend the dub.
Yeah, I would say that as a feed off of that moment in that joke, not joke, but like that misunderstanding, I initially felt apprehensive about the idea of she having feelings for him, or for them to have feelings for each other, given the nature of the toxic start that they had from the bullying. Until I think, and this would be just revisit what I had said earlier, that like when you realize that like he was the only one who ever paid her attention in a very toxic way. It's still not good, but I understand why the fact that he then became the only one to want to reach out to her later sort of like emphasize that, and why he was an important person to her.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
still
I mean, I think from the
emotions to me, but I get where it's coming from. It's a weird, not weird, but like I really appreciate that they did go there and didn't make this all out about a romance, because then that would have really put me off. But the idea that like there would be complicated feelings that come from this, you know.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think I agree with that for the most part, that if there was more of a romantic focus, it would really detract from a lot of the other themes that make this movie stand out and shine on its own.
Yeah, and this is a genre of manga, shoujo, where typically it is very romance themed, although it's usually heavy slice of life as well. And um, per the original author, while you know they didn't want to have just a, oh, these are two people who get together in the end, she wanted to focus on the personal growth. Although from what I've heard, there's a little bit more in the manga at the end that implies that they stay very close after separating for a little while, because they go their separate ways, just appropriately as they grow up, but that they come back together later, and then it kind of just implies that these are still two important people to each other. And I kind of I appreciate when series at least take the trouble to give that nuance.
have you guys seen 13 Reasons Why?
I don't want to.
No, I haven't even heard of it.
You haven't even heard of it?
Sorry.
Oh man, that's a big like cultural phenomenon in the US.
Giving it a little Google search here, and it looks like
What I initially saw of
Western high school drama.
It's a drama about suicide.
It's essentially it's very similar to A Silent Voice, but they're older, and it's not, I mean, it's not as nice as A Silent Voice, but it's essentially a bullying story,
Yeah,
as well. So that's why I'm asking.
Somebody told me that they didn't feel they handled it with care, like the story, because I feel like childhood suicide is a very serious topic. And from what I heard, doesn't this show start with the idea that someone has committed suicide?
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah, so I think she's dead when the show starts, if I'm not mistaken. I think it has already happened. I think, yeah, in the beginning, it has already happened. And then basically it's the retelling of everything that came before, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, because the main idea is that there are some tapes and she records tapes. And, oh, yeah. And so she's dead already, but each tape contains so basically she makes a tape for each person that has wronged her and that has led to her committing suicide. So each episode of the show, and in the book I imagine, because I haven't read the book, but I imagine it's like each chapter is one person, one tape for each person, and then you kind of get the story of that person and how he or she wronged the girl that eventually committed suicide. So it's a very interesting story. Actually, it's very well done. Like narratively, the narrative is very like the pace is very good, and it's really like a mystery, really. So and then I think the book is just that the first season of the show, and then the show becomes absolutely atrocious going into the second season. But I think the book is just the first season, and the first season is pretty well done in terms of a narrative and all that. After that, it's just a complete garbage. But I'm referring mostly to.
I think I remember there being a lot of pushback from like the American Sociology Association or whatnot about the idea of this big publication to dramatize your own suicide is almost the idea sort of gives a romanticization of it. Like they said that kind of an act and making a whole big production of it is something that can be problematic when you make a big drama about it, because there's a lot of impressionable young kids who, and apparently there was like a lot of schools that had to deal with like an uptick in not like suicides but increase of self-harm.
Yeah.
It just made me not want to watch the show.
Yeah, it's like it's a debate, because I don't know what the right answer is. On the one hand, you're, and I wouldn't like, I don't know. I think the show is just a consequence of the book, right? But either writing a book or or doing a show, making a show about it, you are raising awareness, for and honestly, I don't know. I don't have enough information about the author to say like what was the intention behind her. Or, it might even be a guy. I imagine it's a girl, but whoever the author is, I don't even remember. He or she, I don't know why the person wrote the book, but I do know that when they were having that argument, it was like the two sides of the argument were, and honestly, it's difficult to say who's right. One side is, you're raising awareness towards this issue, and maybe that was the intention of the author all along, right? And I think there's a value to that. And then the other side is you're just essentially making money or making entertainment from this very serious issue that you're just going to make things worse. And honestly, I don't know what the answer is for. I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I mean, you can look at it both ways, really.
And I think this is why I appreciated A Silent Voice's take on both Shoya's and Shoko's attempts, because it's clearly a very personal thing to them. It's not something they're not trying to punish anybody. They're punishing themselves, which is something that there's no glorification of it. It's you see the offhand, and which, by the way, Shoya's mom is amazing. That must be one of the best moms in anime that I've watched, where she just tears into him when she just flippantly like asks him, why did you try to kill yourself? Like right there at the table.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely a strong single mother.
Yeah.
I certainly get that impression from her.
And it was very impressive. It left a big impression on me on just how nuanced. It definitely it gave the opportunity to show that how this bullying and how this isolationism leads to the desire to do so, while also allowing both characters to see just how much they could have hurt people even more by going through with it when they're thinking that they're only punishing themselves. I really, really appreciated that. And I feel like this hits me stronger too, because there's another, to bring up, if we're going to bring another series into that, I know there was a series that came out that I'd recommend to both of you called Wonder Egg Priority, which deals a lot with, again, the idea of teenage suicide and the different reasons why, like different kids, whether it be abuse, isolationism, bullying. It's done in the form of the Magical Girl format.
Mhm.
which is an interesting take on it. And I guess that's why I was even more ready for A Silent Voice now, is because of how much that show, which this was one of my favorite stuff of this season. Um, I really feel like these kind of things are giving people the opportunity to realize like how much we're failing kids in this regard, on the mental health aspect. Um, it's not just in Japan, although in Japan does have a big problem with this. Um, I really appreciate the care that they're allowing for this. And I think that's sort of where, based on what I had read on 13 Reasons Why I didn't want to watch it, is I felt like there wasn't enough care given to how it's presented.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just based on what I'm skimming off of a quick Google search here, it doesn't look to me like something that was crafted with empathy around suicide. It looks like something that was, crafted to show it as a vessel of drama.
Yeah.
mm, I'm not so
But
sure
again, I haven't
that's.
seen
I'm
it,
not.
so I guess
Yeah,
I
I'm not so sure that's true. I don't. I don't think. I don't. I'm not so sure that's true. But I don't know what the motivation of the author is. But I do think that the first. So the Netflix show is really shitty after the first season. But I don't think that the book really covers the other seasons. I think the only adaptation really is the first season adapts the book. And then after that, the quality declines sharply. So I think the Netflix stuff is just nonsense. It's just garbage, and I think that's really bad. Now the first season and the book, I think. No, I don't know. I think we can read about the author later on because we don't have time obviously now. But while we're talking, but I did think that the author was trying to deal with the issue in a serious way. Um, but the reason I brought it, I thought that you guys might have seen it or read it. But I like A Silent Voice a lot more, like 100 times more than 13 Reasons Why. And but I just thought the especially if you guys had seen it, the comparison would be relevant because well, first of all, it shows that this is not really a Japanese problem. I mean, the U.S. has a massive problem with bullying and teenage suicide,
Mhm.
children's suicide, and I mean, this is pretty ubiquitous in the U.S. as well, and I'm sure in other countries as well. I mean,
Yeah, I
uh,
think that what Ian pointed out earlier is that the rates of suicide in Japan are absurdly high, though. Like, I think it has one of the highest in the world.
yeah, it's definitely up there. Um,
I think so. Yeah, I think it has pretty high suicide rate.
yeah, I could definitely talk about like the pitfalls and the seedy underbelly of Japan for long periods of time. Um,
But I mean, bullying is a big problem in American schools as well, for sure. I don't know if it's as big as in Japan, but I
I
think
guess I would say, it, uh, like the U.S. and Japan share a lot of the same issues, but they have different aspects.
Mhm.
So, for example, bullying in U.S. schools is very much seen as a school issue, whereas in Japan, um, that's treated as something like that's a private matter that two families are expected to deal with on their own, and that's it. That's why there's that scene where uh, Shoya's mom goes to the bank and pulls out, a massive wad of cash, and is essentially paying off Shogo's family. I mean, it's
For all
partially for
yeah.
the hearing aids, but it's just as much about like showing respect. And then there's also the eye for the eye scene where she comes back and she's bleeding from the ear, and it's implied that Shoko's mom ripped her earring out,
Yeah.
right? Like this
what?
would never happen in a U.S. School system that would ideally, facilitate and broker a solution to the bullying or not for that matter.
It might not
But-
be, it might not be a successful way, but yeah, it's a different way that it's handled.
Sure, but I guess like part of the discussion in a U.S. system is that um, I think schools are much more willing to get involved in cases of bullying early on, whereas that's very rare in a Japanese school.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because yeah, I don't really know. I don't have that knowledge. But what I did like about a Silent Voice a lot more than 13 Reasons Why is 13 Reasons Why is basically a very bleak, very dark story. You know, it shows you like the ugliness of people. And a silent voice really shows you to a great extent like the beauty of people, the beauty of humans, of human relations. And it starts from a place of evil, you know, of hatred, of aggression. But that's also part of human nature. I mean, that's very natural, you know, like all the behaviors that I believe, like all the behaviors you see in the beginning between the kids. I mean, that's very normal, you know. Like I've like growing up, you know, I've seen many like similar scenes, you know, like kids are not particularly nice to each other in my experience. But it doesn't go to a dark place afterwards. I mean, you still have a lot of shadows, you know, like suicide and, you know, like self-hatred and all that. But I like the exploration. Like I thought it was very well done, you know, because it's very serious, it's like very intense, but it also feels very realistic. But that's not just thrown at you like, look at all this shit that, you know, like they're going through. And you know, it's almost like you feel good about yourself because you're not in that situation, you know. Like that's why you feel like when you watch a show like 13 Reasons Why, oh, I, I'm glad I'm not there, you know. But in a silent voice, you want to be a part of it. You want to like go through that hardship with those characters because they are growing and they are learning from their mistakes and they are finding like beauty in the ugliness of life, you know. So I thought that it's really a redemption story, but it's like so well done. It's so slow, you know, like in the beginning of the movie, it's very slow. You don't really know what's going on. You know, you just think it's a bullying story, but you know, and then it kind of changes. It's like I feel like for the first half an hour, you don't really know what's going on in the movie, exactly where it's going to go. And then it just like it catches like some sort of like, it's like a almost like a poem, you know. It feels like you're listening to a poem and there are several stages, but everything starts to get to come together, right? It's very rare, I think, to get to watch a movie or experience a story that's so well crafted that it feels
Well,
like it's the right pace. Everything's coming together at the right time.
well, pretty much everyone had a. There's so many characters with a character arc
Yeah,
within this one
everybody.
movie.
And
Like,
every main character had a character arc that was done well. It's just some were big, some were small, but everything came together at the end.
yeah, Yuzuru basically like, learning to become her own person and relying on basically looking up to Shoya as an older brother. She comes to rely on him and then grows up a little from that to, some of the other friends, like the girl Kawaii, who eventually learned that while she never directly bullied her basically like laughing from a distance was still
She realized that she was complicit.
to Ueno. Don't know how much of I don't know whether she realizes that a lot of her animosity was built from her crush on Shoya. She clearly had feelings for him. And perhaps once he started showing attention to her, that prompted her to goad him to do more. And then, you know, again, it prompted her to focus her anger on Shoko and make it even worse. I mean, it just goes to show like how, she might not have fully come to realize all of her actions, but she still, I feel like, toward the end, at least made peace with it. Her character is one that I look at like, man, that's a complicated arc she went through without perhaps tying it with a neat bow at the end. And that to me is also fantastic writing, because not everybody probably is going to have that redemption. Like even his old friends who fished him out of when he fell into the pool, like, they didn't want to have taken any credit for it, because the reason why they probably followed him was because they were going to make fun of him.
Well, it's that's yeah, that's it's cool because I do think that she has an arc and it's resolved, but it's not simple, right? That's kind of like what I was saying as well, but I didn't use those words. But yeah, I like that a lot. That it's not simple, it's not moralistic. They're not like giving you a moral lesson, They're showing people are ugly and they can also be beautiful. And in this case, they were certainly more beautiful than ugly at the end, but it was a difficult journey. It didn't start well. It didn't
Well,
start
and the
well. It started pretty badly, but it got there and it's complex. I mean, I don't even how do you pronounce her name? Wego,
Bueno,
the cat girl.
Yeah,
um
Ueno.
bueno.
that was so weird that she had a tail at some point. But anyways, the cat girl, that's
He worked
she
at that cat store, or
A cat
yeah.
cafe.
Oh
yeah.
yeah, that was so weird. Yeah, they have those here as well for crazy cat people.
Yeah, I know the girl who started it.
There you go. I mean, it's a crazy thing. I love that they have so many bizarre things in the movie. But she has a pretty complicated arc, and she's not a very nice person, but she's certainly one of the most interesting people in the movie. It's so interesting, and she makes the other characters shine as well.
Mhm.
Like it's all like pieces of this puzzle. And I certainly think this is Ishida's movie, like it's him, like I don't know if it's like that in the manga, but at least that's how I saw the movie. This is his story, but then you have the other characters are like all of them are extremely well done, but he's the glue, he's the glue that brings everybody together at the end.
Well, and Shoko, as her arc, of course, is complicated and messy, and one that has a lot of complicated emotions, from the fact that she mentions how much she hates herself, you know to how much that feeds into the idea that the attention that she got from Shoya early were, you know that fed into her own emotions about herself. And
Well,
then
I
to
thought I thought personally, I thought that was the most out of all the very interesting emotions that they deal with. I thought that was the most interesting for me. It was the fact that my favorite scene in the movie is when she's getting her ass kicked by the cat girl, and the cat girl is like, what's her name? Wego,
bueno,
Ueno.
Wayno.
yeah.
So Wayno is basically kicking her ass, and she's saying, I bet you hate me. I bet you hate me. And she tells her, no, I don't hate you. I hate myself. And that is like so powerful, because then you realize that you know it was all like she always hated herself. There's a huge degree of self-hatred because she feels like she's a nuisance to everybody, and she is a nuisance to everybody in some sense, but also she's she's elevating everybody as well, and that's what she doesn't see,
Well,
right?
this whole nuisance is perpetuated by a society that has failed to properly know how to integrate her. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
it's
totally.
and so, like, yeah, she feels like it's a nuisance, but no one's making the effort, because it's not her fault that her mom caught something while she was pregnant, and that led to her daughter having degenerative hearing. um Apparently, yeah, that's what it was. It was a medical condition. Her mother contracted like a disease or something while pregnant,
Mhm.
which is a danger that happens during pregnancy, is that
For sure.
disease can lead to um, an atypical child. Um,
but even if she was like, and certainly she had problems, she had a very big physical disadvantage, and she was a nuisance in some sense, but she was also a fantastic person, so
Yeah.
she was an amazing person, and people did see that, as like as they were growing up, and in fact, I'm pretty sure Ishida was in love with her. It was I at least I thought they were both in love with each other. But even if he wasn't in love with her, she was extremely important to him as a person. Like she was really she was his downfall, but she was also his saving grace. And I think she was very valuable, and people saw that in her. She didn't see it in herself, but that's also something that is pretty common for a lot of people.
Well, I think that's how they related too, is that I think after everything that happened to him, he was, and that's why he had that moment where he basically said horrible things to everybody and pushed them all away at the end, because he himself felt like he was undeserving of friendships, of undeserving of niceness. And, and that's what ultimately led to her suicide attempt, because she felt like she ruined everything for him. Um,
Yeah.
Part of like their toxic codependence they have on each other. One that again, apparently the manga allows a little bit breathing room to for their friendship and importance of each other. Um, I think, yeah, she clearly has feelings for him. He might have for her as well. But I think what it more comes down to is how important they end up being for each other and helping each other grow. Hopefully out of a codependence, which is what they kind of have there at some point. But um, just fantastic writing all around on all these characters and how it rolls together. I'm still amazed by this and how they put it together. And
Yeah, I think this definitely kind of touches on uh, one of the more complex themes in the movie, which is the infantilization of differently abled people. I think that's really the genesis of a lot of Shoko's feelings of guilt and despair. Right, like she starts hating herself because her entire world is, people catering to her to some degree. Like her grandmother, doesn't really do anything in retirement other than focus on learning sign language. In the manga, they also talk about how Yuzuru is fairly gender non-conforming because of their mother's choice to raise them in a more masculine gender role as a means of giving Shoko like a stronger will and more social protection. And there's that scene between Yuzuru and their grandmother where their grandmother says, I want you to do something for yourself. I want you to live for yourself. I think we see that quite a lot, is that a lot of other people are, living for Shoko, and Shoko's a perfectly capable person. Like, she's pretty good at reading lips. She still has some hearing. Like, the only thing she really needed was for someone to talk a little bit slower and maybe like look at her when they were talking. And, she'd do just fine. But instead, we see that she's kind of regulated to all of these like specialty programs, which are few and far between. Like when Shoya first reconnects with her, she's going to some program at like a community center that's mostly just like old people. Right. So I can't help but imagine that's the sort of program that, it's like, well, it's probably the best fit. Like you can come in and we'll have, specialists who can hang out with you. And it's just like a small group time. It doesn't really seem like something that would be as effective for a deaf person.
Yeah. Oh man, this is an interesting year to talk about this movie because of The Sound of Metal.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it yet, but
I haven't, but I really want to. It's just because I love metal so much.
And so that shows again, like how even here, like as I mentioned, like I was still shocked. I was shocked at how they handled her, but even here, we don't have a lot of the best support for the deaf community, and there's still a lot of stigma around, just accepting that you're deaf and other people accepting it as well. Um,
Yeah, I
and
mean, she's just generally treated as being stupid. Like even at the end when Uena like still refuses to accept her, she calls her a moron. Like she's not dumb, she just can't hear.
right,
Right.
and then I liked how she goes, "But well, you didn't get a Japanese."
She's like, moron.
Yeah, baka.
Yeah.
That was I enjoyed that.
Like it definitely shows I think that was like a fantastic way to end the movie because it shows how incapable of like hatred and resentment that Shoko has as a character, which is what makes her so endearing. Because it would be very easy for someone with her life experience to just grow up being bitter and resenting everything and everyone for realizing how you've been treated, but she definitely doesn't. I think that's why she's so likable. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. No, this is gonna make me. I think I'm gonna end up reading the manga eventually, just because I kind of want to. I've kind of fallen in love with this author and artist now. But I also, because I just kind of want to see the little. Apparently, there's like the manga goes like a little bit further beyond. There's like 10 chapters they didn't cover in this that I kind of want to read. Because I want to see how they end up.
Yeah. So I'm glad this movie was a little bit more interesting than Mortal Kombat.
Yes.
Which was our last podcast. I certainly enjoyed this movie more.
I'm glad you like this movie, Bruno. I'm sorry Dan and I kind of jumped all over this because we're just so stoked about it, but it was good to hear that you really liked it and you were pleasantly surprised.
Trust our anime recommendations for you, Bruno.
What?
Trust our anime recommendations for you. We won't do you wrong.
The anime recommendations, yeah.
Next one we're gonna pick will be action. So
yeah,
how about that?
I mean, you pick whatever you think is interesting. Like I'm glad that this was a cool movie, though. I'm glad it was a really good movie. But yeah, this was I mean, this was a really cool movie, and I hadn't seen it before, and it was also something I had never heard of before, so it was surprising. But also, I mean, it was an anime, so it's probably not a lot of people have heard of it.
It was a bit of an international hit, though. It wasn't as big, like I think theatrically, as Your Name was, which Your Name was like wasn't it the #1 anime movie?
Yeah, but even Your Name, I mean, if you ask the average person, they probably haven't heard of it.
Right.
I've heard of it, but I mean, I'm a little bit more informed than the average person in terms of films because I read about it more. But I mean, even like Your Name, I don't think most people really have heard of it.
Yeah, no. Whereas apparently now Demon Slayer is still beating Mortal Kombat in the box office.
Yeah, because it's a better movie.
Well, I mean, it's much better. Yeah.
Demon Slayer.
Yeah.
An anime.
Yeah.
It's the movie continuation from the first season of the most insanely huge hit. Like, I still don't understand how or why it is I mean, it's a good series, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I'm on like episode 15 or 16 right now, and I would say it's good, but
are they in the mountains?
They just did the bathhouse episode.
Okay. So you're basically getting right into the arc that really defines the height of the hype of the show.
Okay. Because like 15 episodes in, I'm like, this is kind of cool, but like it's not like god tier anime for me yet,
right.
Which seems as though that's what everyone is hailing this to be.
There's a moment in a later episode that became probably a scene that almost broke Twitter. And you'll know it when it happens.
Sure.
But yeah, like that, the movie, Bruno, to put it in perspective, this series and movie. So when you look at like all the top selling like anime and manga related stuff,
Okay.
so all of them, so like let's say the number two sold 5 million copies of manga and had this many copies of whatnot. And 5 million is a lot. Like they did, that's great sales. Demon Slayer, when you look at those lists, will be like 50 to 60 million sales.
So is it a new manga?
It actually just finished last year.
Or a new anime?
The anime was new last year, and it's huge right now. And
So it's like a huge new phenomenon.
yeah,
Is it about slaying demons?
yes,
Yeah.
it's actually remarkably simple in its premise.
But it's fun, I guess.
Yeah, I think you would really like it. You should jump on it, and we can watch the movie.
Yeah.
By the way, I was talking about like movies that people don't know about, and it's really a shame that I'm looking at how this movie doesn't get nominated for the Oscars of Best Animated Movie.
It
Like, it
didn't.
just goes to show that the Oscars are a little bit biased towards.
Yeah, I mean the Oscars are kind of some bullshit, anyways, and I think,
yeah,
especially with like,
that's why nobody watches it anymore.
yeah, I think especially with like, what was the Korean movie?
Parasite.
Parasite. Things like Parasite. There are a lot of movies done by like people of color that have gotten like no mention and no recollection.
Well, Parasite won.
Parasite won, but that was like, I think that was the first thing that really brought light to that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the Oscars are kind of an artifact of cinema.
Well, when the voting base is heavily skewed, really old white.
Yeah,
dudes.
it's rich old white people.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's certainly in terms of animation, it seems that it's completely biased towards American animation.
Well, it always goes to a Pixar film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I mean, they should just
ridiculous.
call it Best Pixar Film of the Year.
Because
Right.
I think in 2016, Zootopia won the Oscar, but I mean,
It was good, but
it's okay. But I mean, we can't really compare something like Zootopia to this movie. I
oh
mean,
yeah, no,
it's on
Silent. This is a
completely
better.
different level.
And there's an even better version of Zootopia on Netflix right now called Beastars.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now another new series that's streaming called Odd Taxi, in a similarly where anthropomorphized animals. Although this one,
Or No Guns Life.
yes.
But the sad thing though, it wasn't even nominated, and
Yeah.
neither was Your Name. I haven't seen Your Name, but you guys were saying it was also really good. It wasn't
Her
nominated.
Name was the biggest anime movie of all time before Demon Slayer.
Really?
And yeah, it didn't get any Oscar nominations.
They should really look into stop being biased, because it's just, I mean, it's embarrassing, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say it's a multifaceted problem because the animated movie Oscar genre has got this stigma that it needs to be like a fun, colorful, cheery, bright, and uplifting movie.
Mhm.
Which, I mean, there are plenty of animated movies that are far from that. Like, so I think it's kind of a misnomer to be like, what was the best animated movie? Because it somehow implies that all animated movies are the same.
And that they're lesser than live. I mean, there's
Yeah.
It would be like if we had a category of just like what movie had like, what movie was best because of its like special effects, and then we just like graded them on like their CG.
Well, looking at the best animated movies, really in the Oscars, it's really a category for what are the best kids movies. You know,
right. I mean, is Beauty
It's
and the
gonna be
Beast
called
still the
best
only-
animated movie if you're not gonna give it to the best animated movies.
Is Beauty and the Beast the only animated movie still to be nominated for best movie?
I mean, I don't know. I would have to check.
I feel like it's still the case because I can't think of any since, but I think it's both as a stigma against animation, you know, because and it's a looking down on voice acting as an art on its own, which is itself hard to do. There's good actors who are terrible voice actors.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and vice versa, terrible actors who are good voice actors, or just sometimes people who you can't believe they're an amazing voice actor, like Mark Hamill. Um,
Yeah.
like I still can't get over the fact that he's the Joker, but but that's like, I feel like it's a not recognizing the power that animation has to be able to make movies that you can't do otherwise. I think that's the reason why the Disney live action remakes suck, because
Oh,
you
totally.
lose a lot of the magic of the animation. Like, somebody was doing side by side panels of like how the dance scenes in the Aladdin movie just look terrible now. I'm like, well, yeah, because the feats that Aladdin was doing were impossible
Right.
in the animation, but that was part of what's so good about it. And so, like, the stuff that we see in a silent voice, like, I feel like there's certain things that they achieved with this that you really couldn't do with a live action.
Oh,
I
definitely not.
think they're
And
gonna
I think
try.
that concept exists very much in like in video games with like style.
Mhm.
So in the age of everybody having a high horsepower computer, like we still see fantastic games being made with pixel art, and I think it's because it has gone beyond just like a stylistic choice. As like I'm making something that's a throwback. It's using like pixel art and pixel animation is great because it covers up a lot of weird looking details.
Mhm.
Like you don't have the bugs and the uncanniness that you get out of like high fidelity AAA hyper realist animated video games, and it doesn't harm immersion, and in fact it helps you, in my opinion, it helps you really embrace the format and the medium for what it is,
Right.
because it engages your imagination a little bit more. You have to actively think about it and think it what you're looking at, and I think animated movies very much rely on the same concept.
And I think that Weathering with You, if we want to talk another anime at some point, by the same guy who did Your Name, is one where it really is a movie that cannot be done live action. Um,
None of those movies have been nominated for the Oscars.
that's a shame.
Yeah, none of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why, especially amongst millennials, like the Oscars are rapidly becoming irrelevant. They're going to go the way of
Well, I agree, but I think it's even worse for animation. I mean, it seems. I had already kind of like thought about this, but I mean, now I'm just looking at the nominees for the last 10 years or so. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They shouldn't even have that category if they're gonna make it. Just it's basically kids movies.
well, the even just like with best movie, it was like what 2018 where they screwed up and La La Land was the winner over
Moonlight.
over Moonlight.
Well, yeah, but that was a mistake that they made announcing because I
they-
think Moonlight actually won.
No,
Yeah.
I thought La La Land was the winner.
No,
No,
no, they read the wrong name.
they read the wrong name, which is a fuck up. But I mean,
Yeah, the La La Land showed up there, and then they wait, like, guys, look, this says
yeah,
Moonlight.
it was so stupid. It was pretty ridiculous. But I mean, it happens, I guess. I mean, I don't know how something like that happened at the. I mean, they're really dropping the ball. I mean, this year apparently, the viewership was the lowest in like 20 years or something like that, and also usually the last. I haven't even seen it, but I read all this.
Well, 'cause I
Um,
think people didn't go to movies; they didn't see movies.
Yeah.
No point.
Yeah, but also like the Oscars have become pretty relevant. I mean, because the downward trend was already there, even before this year. It's a pretty steep downward
Yeah, I mean, I
trend.
definitely didn't watch, even though I watched most of the nominees this year because I was told that most of them are good, and actually they are pretty good. They were pretty good movies this year. But I just still didn't feel the need to actually watch it.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, I mean, I almost appreciate that they did have an Oscars edition this year because there really weren't that many movies.
Mhm.
So I'm glad guess I will give it to them that at least they did something, because I thought they were just gonna cancel it, and I mean, at least they did something. But also, usually the best picture prize usually is the last thing in the Oscar ceremony, and because they're trying to increase their viewership, they made best actor the last thing because they thought that
Chadwick Boseman was gonna win.
yeah, he was gonna win, and he didn't even win, which I mean, it's a very really awkward thing, you put the prize as the last thing, and then Anthony Hopkins wins and
And he
not
wasn't.
him, and Anthony Hopkins wasn't even there to accept it. I mean, it's almost worse than the La La Land and Moonlight screw up. Almost, that one was worse probably. But anyways, at least they did something, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's stupid that these great films are not even nominated for best animated movie. They probably don't even know about them, honestly.
I mean, some of it's campaign. Like, you have to have a studio pay money to try and get people to vote for it. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's also about like marketing, right? Like, no one's going to watch the movie if they don't hear about it, um, which I think is why a lot of movies die on the vine. And I think there are a lot of things that have, strategically been killed off for one reason or another. People have cited Treasure Planet as being something where Disney was just like, this movie's in production. We've got this new studio called Pixar that we want to focus on. Let's kick this movie out the door and break even on it, and not focus on not focus on it too much and focus our efforts elsewhere. Like, it's a great movie, but it wasn't marketed well, and there are plenty of video games that have had the same fate. Like Beyond Good and Evil is a classic example. That came out in 2007 when it was going against Halo 2 and God of War, I think.
Yeah.
It came out in a year that was like, it was like horrible to release any other video game because it was mostly Halo was on the market, and that was like the thing. So it was just like completely overshadowed. And I guess I don't know what the ad campaign was like for A Silent Voice, but I feel like anime movies are still struggling in the American market, where they're trying to break out from under Miyazaki's shadow in a lot of ways. And once they do, I think they'll kind of hit a golden age. But until people stop referring to movies as like, oh, this is like the next Miyazaki movie, you're not going to see that happen.
Anyways, let's wrap this up. Do you guys have any final thoughts that haven't been expressed?
I think I got my note all from my notes in.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got it all in. My one takeaway from this movie is that it's never too late to be a better person.
Yes.
That's a good takeaway. We'll end with that. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for suggesting this movie, Ian, and thanks for participating in the discussion, gentlemen. Subscribe to the channel if you made it all the way to the end